tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We're all worried about how our kids walk into the digital world and how they can be exploited.
How do we protect children and young people from sexual extortion? The tragic death of a 12-year-old boy in Prince George renews calls for better online protection. Plus,
yeah, I'm not going to make any firm commitments right now.
Don't expect a permanent bike lane through Stanley Park anytime soon. How the ruling party is backing off a campaign pledge. And
you're with some of your best friends and you're helping out with something that has quite a noble cause.
Stepping up to help. Young people in Cranbrook volunteer at the local food bank as more people ask for help.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. The shocking suicide of a 12-year-old boy in Prince George is renewing calls about how to protect children and youth from online sexual extortion. As Lindsay Duncombe explains, experts say it's often teenage boys who are targeted.
The 12-year-old BC boy who police say killed himself wasn't alone in his pain. Thousands of Canadian children share the shame of being sexually extorted online.
It makes me cry, it makes me sad, it makes me angry.
I'm speaking to a man we're calling Kyle. CBC News has agreed not to identify him. He says he considered suicide after someone threatened to expose explicit photos and videos.
I truly went through it myself, and I was trying to find an alternative way to kind of, have this story end.
Cybertip.ca receives 50 sextortion reports every week. Where genders were known, 91% of those reports came from boys. It says boys are typically targeted for money, girls for additional images.
There's multiple ways.
The White Hatters, a group of internet safety educators, have helped 300 young Canadians dealing with sexual extortion. It says the criminals usually don't share the intimate images. They just exploit victims' insecurity for cash.
We make it very clear to students in working in schools, don't pay the blackmail money, because more likely, and we've seen it, they're going to come back and ask for more.
The federal government continues to promise legislation to protect children online.
It's a complicated space to legislate in and on, but the urgency of moving, I think, is real.
Kyle paid $2,500 and reported the extortion to police.
But at the end, what people fail to realize is that there's so much going on in this world that a picture of yourself isn't worth you losing your life over.
A message he hopes young people hear and believe. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
One educator says programs to help youth are available, but they need more help to provide access to those at risk. Our Michelle Elliott spoke to with Jesse Miller, the founder of Mediated Reality, on BC Today.
Education at the middle school level, dealing with sex education and awareness about being vulnerable online. How feasible is that? How possible?
Well, it's feasible and it exists. One of the points that is really important to recognize here, and it was brought up by the caller, and again, bringing those stories to the surface are important. We have not only curriculum, but programs like SOGI 123 that address issues that young people face. A 2017 study from the Oxford Institute for Internet Research highlighted that middle school kids don't have the mental capacity, the cerebral ability to navigate the social media world on top of their ever-changing world when it comes to peer-based interactions, hormonal changes, developmental changes, and again, environmental changes, going from environments that were very kind of primary to secondary and more independent. But when you add 24-hour communication to the mix and you have these in-depth relationships that occur and you have group chats, it's overwhelming for that capacity of brain. The thing here is that currently in our polarized communications around parents' rights and educators' responsibilities, it seems like there's a lot of critique that goes into places that target programs that are very effective at minimizing the risks that young people face, especially when a student is looking at their sexual orientation or gender identity. And it becomes this extreme of indoctrination or where we're leading children as opposed to giving them resources for when they are facing turmoil. So again, programs like sexual exploitation awareness, it's something that exists, but from the private sector coming into schools, social media awareness. I've presented in Prince George this calendar year. I've presented in the communities where this family resides. And so for people to raise monies, parent advisory councils to bring programs in, it's great, but we have so many resources that are available. It doesn't mean that a young person is going to utilize it unless, of course, they know that they can feel safe communicating. And again, we can't speak to the specific individual, but some kids just don't feel safe.
That was Jesse Miller, the founder of Mediated Reality, speaking on BC Today with the CBC's Michelle Elliott. Stories like this, as we know, can be upsetting for some. If you need help, you can reach the BC Crisis Centre 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The number is 1-800-784-2433. That is also 1-800-SUICIDE. They offer help in more than 140 languages. Well, we're less in the red, but not expected to grow by as much. That's the latest diagnosis on BC's economy from the provincial government. And as Mira Baines explains, the finance minister says we're being hit by higher interest rates and slower global growth.
The government focused its message on reassuring British Columbians about what it calls a stable and diversified budget. The key takeaway, the province's forecasted deficit is now at $5.6 billion, a $1.1 billion decrease from Q1's projection.
BC's economy and fiscal position remains stable. The economic outlook is slightly lower compared to Q1 as the global economy is slowing and more uncertain.
The deficit reduction was a result of primarily two factors: higher than expected corporate and personal income tax filings from the CRA, and the province factoring in $358 million from the federal government for wildfire costs. Firefighting and recovery costs are among the highest the province has ever seen, so that money from Ottawa helped BC's bottom line this quarter. Even so, the official opposition, BC United, says the province should not be running a deficit of this size.
Certainly the actual raw number of the deficit has changed for the better, but I would point out it is still a deficit, a record deficit in British Columbia. In fact, even through COVID, we did not see deficits of this size.
The province is also in the midst of a deepening housing crisis, with the finance minister admitting housing starts are expected to decline next year.
Similar to the private sector, the ministry expects housing starts to decline in 2024, reflecting higher interest rates, elevated construction costs, and labor constraints.
Conroy says she'll be meeting with the Economic Forecast Council to discuss the economy ahead of the next budget. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
The mayor of Kamloops is calling for provincial, federal, and First Nation support to tackle erosion caused by the North Thompson River. It's damaged a number of properties in the west side neighborhood of the city.
I think that we really need to protect our riparian areas and to mitigate the damage in the future and be proactive instead of reactive. You know, it's like here right now, like there's a couple of people for sure could have lost their lives. Very easy and be in the bottom of the river or under that dirt right over there. And
Jackson says if nothing is done, the river could wipe away properties and historic graves. A coalition of coastal First Nations is in Ottawa to fight the closure of fish farms. First Nations for Fin Fish Stewardship says salmon farming technology has advanced and past criticism of the industry is no longer relevant.
That's why we're pushing for the development of the Indigenous Centre for Aquatic Health Science so we can do the science together, because so much of this has been about dueling science.
First Nations owned and operated fish farms provide 500 full-time jobs in remote Indigenous communities, which the group says could not easily be replaced by other work. Earlier this month, a different group of Indigenous leaders called First Nations Wild Salmon Alliance called on Ottawa to stand firm on plans to transition away from open net salmon farms in BC waters by 2025. Olympic gold medalist, captain of Canada's women's soccer team, and Burnaby's own Christine Sinclair is set to play her last international match here next Tuesday. In her honor, BC Place Stadium will be renamed Christine Sinclair Place for that day. Early Edition host Stephen Quinn and CBC Sports reporter Scott Regier chatted this morning about making the change permanent.
Finally, big honor for Canada's biggest soccer star.
Yeah, Christine Sinclair to play her final game for her country a week from today. She'll suit up for Canada in a friendly against Australia, of course, at BC Place. More than 40,000 tickets have already been sold. Just went online this morning. I want to see this sold out by week's end. Hopefully that'll be the case. But BC Place, as I'm sure most everyone knows now, will be renamed Christine Sinclair Place for that game. I'm just wondering why we can't do this on a permanent basis, given all she's meant to the sport.
That's true, actually.
I mean, and it's not like BC Place just conjures exotic images.
Oh, no, I know.
Incredibly character-filled stadium, this sort of thing, right? I think there should be serious public discussion about this.
Okay, well, I think you just started it.
All right, well, happy to have done so, if that's
Okay,
the
what do you
case.
think of the idea of renaming BC Place Christine Sinclair Place? Yeah. Call us, let us know, email us, earlyed@cbc.ca, earlyed@cbc.ca.
CBC Stephen Quinn and sports reporter Scott Regier on the Early Edition. Soccer legend Christine Sinclair, as we said, will play her final international game as Team Canada's captain at BC Place next Tuesday, December 5th. TransLink reindeer buses are back on the roads of Metro Vancouver, spreading a little Christmas cheer and collecting donations to give back to the community.
It was just a couple of operators deciding to collect toys and take them to the Christmas Bureau, and it's grown to what it is now.
Bus drivers collect donations of toys and cash through the Toys for Tots program, now in its 38th year. Since it began, it's received over 93,000 toys and raised more than $54,000. Cool buses, festive buses. We like seeing those, don't we, Darius?
Oh, I love a reindeer bus. And you need
You're not
that
scared,
big red
right?
nose. No, but you need the big red nose because of how foggy it's been. And will be tomorrow morning.
Look at you with the segue.
Got it. Killing
very
it.
good.
There we go. Still have a ridge of high pressure in place over BC. That means we will have another foggy morning here in Metro Vancouver. There is another fog advisory in place for the inner parts of the south coast once again, including Victoria. Now, we are expecting to see a considerable amount of fog still, but not as bad as it has been. Now, over the next 48 hours or so, we're going to start to see the ridge retreat to the east, and that means we get to have a little bit of low pressure moving in. Finally, after about a week of these conditions, you can see quite a defined actual center of that low pressure system, so it could mean some gusty winds at times for parts of the north coast, but no really strong winds expected so far for the south coast. Now, as we continue to watch this system roll through, we're going to see some precipitation come down to the south coast as well. And we can see that on our accumulation map. Over the next 24 hours, still very little, pretty much nothing happening, except when we get late into tomorrow evening, we start to see some rain come to the North Island and then spread by the afternoon to Metro Vancouver and other parts of the south coast. So expect that we could see some rainfall, most concentrated, as you'd expect, on the west coast of the island. But tomorrow night will be the return to a more consistent forecast. It's just going to be a rainier, consistent forecast than we've been seeing. But fog tomorrow.
Very good, as it should be. Thanks. On Monday night, the Vancouver Park Board once again debated what a bike lane through Stanley Park ought to look like. And as Justin McElroy explains, their final decision means there may be no separated lane anytime soon, going against what they told the public last election.
ABC Vancouver made a promise when they got into power on the Stanley Park bike lane. And that promise isn't happening.
You should never overpromise on things, and in that case, I clearly overpromised.
That is Vancouver Councillor Mike Clausen, acknowledging that his original pledge that a fully restored bike lane through Stanley Park isn't coming to reality on the timeline he said. He, the mayor, and multiple park board commissioners all made the same pledge, that after years of debate, the temporary bike lane would come out, but that a permanent lane would come in.
To come up with a permanent solution that's safe and not temporary, that's surrounded by orange cones, is the way to go.
But that's not the case. Monday night, the park board received a report from staff saying it would cost up to $50 million for a permanent lane, and there is no money in the budget for it. No commissioner is asked to change the budget to make it happen, and the park board chair doesn't want to promise it will happen in the future.
Yeah, I'm not going to make any firm commitments right now. I've learned that until I get all the information, the report back yesterday, indicated that they are hearing from a large group, a very inclusive group of stakeholders and users of Stanley Park. So I want to hear back from that.
Which is fair, but it means two things. 1, ABC is seeing the clear differences between campaigning and governing. And 2, it means consultations will soon enter a 5th year over one single bike lane. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meanwhile, some parents are angry the park board is proposing a 108% fee increase for field users. For Vancouver Little League, that will mean an extra $7,000 in fees. The board says the hike will deter permit holders from squatting on parkland, but one parent claims this is the same logic the board used to implement the fees in 2010.
And I guess their rationale now is, well, that didn't work, so we're going to charge more and maybe it'll work now. But it certainly didn't.
Little League organizers say they already have a hard time booking diamonds because the board says it doesn't have staff. The league says they've had to travel to Richmond to practice, play, and host tournaments. Inflation has taken a massive toll on many British Columbians. After the break, we're going to speak with a food bank director on the unprecedented surge in demand that she's seeing. Stay with us. Hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. For many, the holidays are not complete without a Christmas tree. But just like about everything else this year, it might cost you a bit more. If you can find one, Yvette Brand explains.
Hunting for that perfect tree is tough enough.
Watch out, watch out. Ah.
Just ask this 10-year-old.
A fake tree isn't the same. You don't get to cut it or anything.
But fresh tree stock is scarce this year.
They smell so good. We want to try to continue this for as long as we feasibly can.
BC gets many of its trees from out of province, but cultivated pine trees are getting harder to find and more expensive. A decent 2-meter-high Christmas tree will cost you $100 to $200.
We continue to have to raise our prices in order to make funds, and for the most part, we're just having to pass that cost off to the customer.
Well, for farmers, all the input costs are up. The cost of fertilizer's up, the cost of pesticides and sprays and everything else up. The cost of labor, it's very difficult to even get labor at a small farm. So all these input costs, fuel, everything is up.
Adding to the challenge, climate change. Heat waves and droughts are not making it any easier. Statistics Canada says this country has lost 1,000 tree farms in a decade, and that's starting to affect retailers. Even some nonprofits are cutting off online sales, otherwise they sell out too fast.
It definitely becomes challenging. We were able to make our way through COVID, which was extremely challenging, and I'd say this is even more challenging.
This year, a North Vancouver Lions Club could barely find 600 trees to sell. They usually buy closer to 1,600. That leaves them short about $30,000 in fundraising revenue they're offsetting with craft sales.
That's a big hole left by missing trees until planting again catches up with Christmas demand. Yvette Brennan, CBC News, Vancouver.
It is Giving Tuesday, a day of donations and acts of kindness. The Vancouver Cantata Singers Choir is fundraising by showcasing its Yuletide concert from last year.
We encourage people to give. Donations support
our local productions, local musicians, music education, and high quality programming for our audiences.
The choir says it knows it's harder for people to donate this year, but it appreciates any contribution you can make. The impact of inflation has taken a toll on many Canadians. A report from Food Banks Canada earlier this week found food bank usage rose to its highest level since the survey began in 1989. Now, to mark Giving Tuesday, we're now joined by Tresca Watson, the Director of Operations at the Mustard Seed Street Church, the largest food bank on Vancouver Island. Tresca, what is food bank demand like for the mustard seed this year?
Yeah, food bank demand is exactly as you were just describing. It's up in ways that we've never seen before. The levels are unprecedented, and that's a word we've used a lot in the last few years, but it adequately describes what we're seeing day in and day out.
Can you put a number on it? How many more people are you seeing?
Well, we're seeing, dozens of new people every day. Food bank use in BC is up over 60% since 2019 and 78.5% across the country since 2019. So we're seeing evidence of that daily. Dozens of new people are turning up at our doors every day.
Is there a certain demographic of people you're seeing more often, or is it everybody?
Well, all of our demographics are up. We see a lot of seniors, we see newcomers to Canada, we see families. The most startling demographic that we're seeing rise very quickly is double income earners. And that's a troubling one because we've not seen a lot of that in years gone by. And so what that's telling us is that, two income earners in the home are still finding it hard to make ends meet.
And if and when you, and as much as you're able to share, when you speak with people who are double income earners who are there to get some help, what do they say to you?
Well, we're just really happy that they've come through our doors. We want to make sure that everyone feels welcome and that they can access our services. But when we are speaking with them, we're hearing about the difficult decisions that they need to make. If you are struggling to make ends meet and you need to pay rent and you need to pay your hydro bill, those are the items that you're going to pay for first. And unfortunately, there just isn't enough left over for groceries a lot of the time.
What are some of the other initiatives you offer to help people dealing with food insecurity?
Yeah, we offer a hot meal program. We offer a program in the summer called Fair Start, which helps kids get new backpacks and new runners and school supply kits before they start school. We're just gearing up for our Christmas season where we're going to be distributing over 1,200 Christmas hampers to families with something a little extra special, some gift cards, some toys for children, fresh produce, and products for them to get through the Christmas season, just to make it a little extra special. Those are some of the things that we offer.
It's very busy right now, and we know food banks are first responders in the cost of living crisis. What long-term solutions do you want to see in the new year and beyond?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is really difficult to see so many people struggling. The long-term solutions are just that. There are lots of ways that we hope that governments at all levels can help contribute to reduce the cost of living. We're just really hopeful that something gives because there really has been no end in sight. The numbers that we're quoting tonight are actually from a study done in March. And here we are at the end of November, and things have changed quite a bit even since then.
Tresca Watson, the Director of Operations at the Mustard Seed Street Church. We appreciate your time and your perspective.
Thank you so much for having me.
A food bank in Cranbrook is also struggling to keep up with surging demand, but as Corey Bullock shows us, some of its youngest members in the community have stepped up to help.
Gage Wilhelm and his grade 5 class at Kootenay Orchard School are a new batch of volunteers, finding out what the food bank does ahead of their school's holiday donation drive.
You're with some of your best friends and you're helping out with something that has quite a noble cause.
A noble cause with a big need.
We are definitely struggling in terms of getting enough donated food in.
And they need a lot. The Cranbrook Food Bank now has over 2,700 clients. That's up 53% over the last 2 years.
It's such an enormous increase in the number of people that we're seeing.
Not only that, the food bank is no longer receiving shipments of food from Calgary through the National Food Sharing System due to a surge in demand there. It's relying on Food Banks BC and the Kelowna Food Bank to help supplement its needs. And it's not just the food that's in short supply. She says 2 full-time employees have recently moved on to other positions.
Excellent.
Thankfully, an army of volunteers, including some of the city's youngest residents, continue to make sure everyone's fed.
It's always fun getting to enjoy the fresh air and knowing that you're helping with something.
You know, some kids have experienced, issues with food security, and lots haven't. And so it's just really nice for them to understand that there's a lot of people in our community that are struggling with food security.
Rose says donations from local grocery stores and monetary donations from the community are also essential, and that hunger affects all walks of life.
It's entrepreneurs. It is sometimes unhoused people. It's coaches. It's your neighbor. It's someone who checks you out at Superstore. It's someone at Walmart. It's everyone. Hunger doesn't discriminate.
A lesson these young volunteers are learning firsthand. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
This coming Friday, we are hosting CBC British Columbia's annual Food Bank Day. We'll have a special day of programming for you here on radio, online, and streaming, and a special 6 p.m. broadcast on Friday as well. Protests against the violence in the Middle East continue, and those calling for peace are now asserting their spending power. More on the BDS movement after the break.
When the spring lobster season on PEI opened this season, something was missing. The mackerel and herring fisheries in the region stayed closed. Fishers rely on those species for bait. DFO shut them down in 2022 to give the stocks a chance to recover.
Certainly herring and mackerel are the big ones here on Prince Edward Island in terms of their important fisheries to us, and we'd like to get them reopened, and we realize these are science-based decisions, but you need accurate and timely information.
In his report, the Federal Environment Commissioner said DFO lacks the ability to collect timely and dependable data. The PEI Fishermen's Association says that is a cause for concern.
No one wants to be in a situation where a fishery's closed. That hurts everyone. And so these are the kinds of things that we need to ensure that we've got good information and good decisions are being made.
Ian McPherson says his association would like to see better ways of collecting information on fish stocks. The PEIFA is working on creating its own electronic logbooks that could give real-time data on catches, rather than waiting for the end of the season or longer.
A lot of the reporting now is done manually. A lot of it's not submitted till the end of the season. And DFO, they have resources devoted to it, but a lot of times we don't get a report on a fishery till about 6 months later.
The PEIFA and other groups are also watching closely what is happening with climate change. Water temperatures are rising, and no one knows exactly how that is going to impact fish stocks.
And we might even need to react quicker than, on an annual or biannual basis. So having real-time data is incredibly important, especially moving into the future as we start to think about how to manage for climate change.
The PEI Fishermen's Association would also like to see a task force set up that could do research on fish stocks after significant environmental events such as post-tropical storm Fiona.
Establish some baseline data. Hopefully we're going to see a bit bounce back in 2024, but at the end of the day, it was a significant environmental impact.
The federal fisheries minister has responded to the commissioner's report, saying she agrees with all the recommendations and actions are already underway to address the issues. Nancy Russell, CBC News, Charlottetown.
The Trudeau government has acknowledged it will not pass Pharmacare legislation this year. A law to create a national universal plan by the end of 2023 is a key part of the Liberal NDP deal that's kept the minority government functioning. Catherine Cullen has more from Ottawa.
It's something the NDP has been pushing for years, a national universal pharmacare program.
We are going to force this government to finally bring in legislation to lay the groundwork for Pharmacare, to bring down the cost of medication for everyone.
The deal between the Liberals and the NDP keeping the government in power says the government must pass a Pharmacare Act by the end of this year. But with the clock running out, this minister was blunt.
Well, yeah, I don't think we're going to get it passed by the end of this year, but we'll definitely keep working, and those conversations are productive.
In theory, the NDP could bring down the government for not living up to the agreement, but they won't go there yet.
We're saying if they need more time, they're going to have to provide more help.
How would you explain to the average person on the street what more is? Is it more money in the long term? Like, I can't picture more here.
Well, stay tuned. That's all I can say.
One challenge for the government, a universal pharmacare program would cost billions at a time when the Liberals are trying to rein in spending.
The question here is how do we deal with the fiscal circumstance that we're in, which is real and serious.
But if cost is the issue, the Prime Minister isn't saying as much.
We know there's more to do, so we will continue to work in responsible ways to move forward to make sure that Canadians can afford to stay healthy.
Now, the NDP point out that this legislation to set up the principles of pharmacare won't cost anything. What it will take, though, is time. The NDP are now saying that they hope that they can get something tabled before Parliament next month. Could take a lot longer, though, to actually get it passed. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Controversial comments from a Metro Vancouver Liberal MP are forcing him to backpedal even after even his own party condemned the statement that seemed to link opposition leader Pierre Poilievre to a deadly Winnipeg shooting. As Catherine Tunney tells us, it's not the first time Ken Hardy has gotten himself in hot water.
A Liberal MP is apologizing for comments that have garnered a strong reaction, even from a member of his own party. On Monday, BC MP Ken Hardy responded to the tragic Winnipeg shooting that has left 4 people dead on the social media platform X, and he said it was beyond troubling to see another mass shooting in Canada. He went on to write that might it be the antisocial, burn everything down, far-right attitude we're seeing creeping in from the U.S., and the creep on the Canadian side, Pierre Poilievre, ? Now, that tweet has caused outrage. The Conservatives called it outlandish and disgusting, and Government House Leader Karina Gould called the comments absolutely inappropriate. Hardy addressed the controversy while walking into the House of Commons this afternoon.
I spoke with the House Leader today, and we worked through the reaction to what we saw. And what emerged was a lot of people got the impression that I was directly linking the tragedy in Winnipeg to something that the Conservatives had done. Well, that's entirely inappropriate. That is not what was intended, but if it happened that way, then I've apologized for that.
However, Hardy told reporters that he isn't backing down from the overall comments that he says he was trying to make. He said he believes the Conservatives are creating a toxic environment, and he stands by that. Now, this is not the first time that Hardy's tweets have landed him in the spotlight. Earlier this fall, he apologized and had to remove a posting that said that a notorious Nazi would be proud of Conservative MPs. Catherine Tunney, CBC News, Ottawa.
More hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza have now been released. The Israeli military and the Red Cross say 12 people, 10 Israeli women and 2 Thai nationals have been freed. Israel is also releasing 30 Palestinians it has been holding in jail, 15 women and 15 teenage boys. And as Issel Moussa reports, talks are on to extend the current ceasefire and get more hostages released.
Another day, another set of Israeli hostages released by Hamas in exchange for Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. Israel and Hamas have accused each other of violating the ceasefire. Still, their fragile truce appears to be holding, as well as hopes for the continued release of more hostages and prison detainees. Afri Bibas is pleading for the return of her family, including her 10-month-old nephew.
We know exactly where they are. Hamas took them, and Hamas is required to bring them back right now. The responsible for their health and their freedom is directly in Hamas's hand.
Aid agencies say a continued pause in fighting is crucial to delivering much-needed aid to Palestinians in Gaza, where more than 2/3 of the population have lost their homes and supplies are quickly running out.
Our team saw hunger, desperation, and destruction. People who have not received any relief in weeks. Hundreds of thousands that are facing an immediate risk of starvation.
The U.S. military is flying 3 plane loads of humanitarian aid to North Sinai in Egypt to be brought into the territory. Meanwhile, Israel has sworn to annihilate Hamas, the militant group that rules Gaza. The country's prime minister says Israel will push for the release of all hostages without exception. Gaza officials say more than 15,000 people have been killed as a result of Israel's bombardment. Many of them are children, and aid agencies warn it could get much worse.
So eventually we will see more people dying from disease than we're even seeing from the bombardment if we are not able to put back this health system and provide the basics of life, food, water, medicines, and of course fuel to operate the hospitals.
Israel says the truce could be extended as long as Hamas continues to release at least 10 hostages per day. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
The violence between Israel and Hamas has triggered demonstrations all over the world. Now a movement known as Boycott, Divest, Sanctions, or BDS, is calling for a global day of action tomorrow. It's being called the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. As Anise Dario explains, organizers hope to influence government action by targeting businesses.
Protesters have been targeting businesses in North America, trying to put financial, economic, or political pressure on institutions here to influence the situation in the Middle East and the fight between Israel and Hamas. Take Scotiabank, where protesters are challenging investments in an Israeli weapons company. It's part of what activists call the BDS movement. Boycott, divest, and sanction. Companies that are tied to Israel's actions in the West Bank or Gaza. The idea is that the financial consequences from companies pulling out of those areas could influence Israeli policy.
You're putting pressure on companies that they just want to make money, and yet they are being, protested for their partnership, for their complicity in what the Israeli government is doing.
It's a tactic used against other countries in the past, for example, South Africa in the late 20th century. And while pro-Palestinian groups don't agree, others call these protests anti-Semitic and say they're targeting Jewish-owned businesses.
If somebody wants to protest the Israeli government, there are Israeli government representatives in Canada at an embassy and at consulates that are the address for protest.
Regardless, some research has shown that these boycott campaigns may not work as intended.
Activists do have obviously lists of companies that you should boycott. I think that is part of the intention to change the behavior of consumers. I think the reality, though, is that people are not always willing to follow through on those intentions.
Where BDS could shift a company's behavior is if its reputation is threatened, but that may not be working in this case. For example, Scotiabank hasn't changed course on investments. Anise Dario, CBC News, Calgary.
41 men have been rescued from a collapsed tunnel in northern India. They'd been trapped since November 12th after the section they were helping build caved in. Salima Shivji has the latest on the rescue.
After an excruciating wait, 17 days underground, finally freedom for all 41 men trapped inside a collapsed tunnel in northern India. The joy and cheers from officials and rescuers hard to contain. As one by one the men came out, healthy and safe, greeted with hugs and sweets. We didn't focus on the lives depending on us and our progress, this rescue worker says. We just cut through all the twisted metal and rubble, and it was a success. The laborers were building a road tunnel deep in the Himalayas, an area prone to landslides when disaster struck more than 2 weeks ago. The only glimpse loved ones had of the trapped workers came days later. Grainy footage from a camera pushed down a pipe, the same way they were getting food, water, and oxygen to survive. Rescuers tried everything. For days, a large mechanical drill worked to reach the men, slamming into metal rods and debris, eventually stalling. Crews then tried to drill in vertically from the top of the mountain. Officials then had to resort to manual drilling and the expertise of so-called rat miners to break through the last few meters of rubble. Their technique unusual and dangerous, using only hand drills and pulleys. My hands have blisters from pulling the rope to get the men up through an 800-millimeter pipe, this rescuer says, but it was worth it. We were all cheering and hooting. For the father of 22-year-old Manjit Chowdhury, the wait to see his trapped son again has been agonizing. Now he feels pure relief. I'm so very happy, the elder Chowdhury says. I'm 55, I've seen life, but my son is very young and has a long life ahead of him. I want him to fight every storm in his long life. The complicated rescue operation that captivated the country, a resounding success. The men are now under medical observation with their families close by. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
A diplomatic spat is deepening between Greece and the United Kingdom. It comes after Britain canceled a meeting between their prime ministers at the last minute. It's part of a long-standing dispute over 2,500-year-old sculptures removed from the Parthenon in the early 19th century. Widely known as the Elgin marbles, they're on display in the British Museum, and Greece wants them back. Dominic Velitis has more from London.
This row is deepening. Downing Street believed it had been given assurances that Greece's Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis would not raise the issue of the sculptures during his visit here to the UK. Indeed, officials at Number 10 said his meeting with the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was agreed on that basis, something which the Greeks are now saying is completely untrue. This all started on Sunday when Mitsotakis did an interview with the BBC in which he spoke of his distress that many of the Parthenon sculptures, as he knows them, remain in the British Museum and that they should be returned to Greece.
If I told you that you would cut the Mona Lisa in half and you would have half of it at the Louvre and half of it at the British Museum, do you think your viewers would appreciate the beauty of the painting in such a way? Well, this is exactly what happened with the Parthenon sculptures.
Words which appear to have angered Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who shortly after the broadcast went out, cancelled his meeting with Mitsotakis, which was scheduled for today. The Greek PM then declined a secondary offer from Downing Street to meet with Britain's Deputy Prime Minister before announcing he was cutting short his trip and heading home. And the two men had plenty to talk about in this meeting that was cancelled, not least of all the situation in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine and other pressing issues the two countries are facing, such as immigration. Both Britain and Greece, of course, have long-standing positions on the Parthenon sculptures, the Elgin marbles. Greece wants them returned and reunited in Athens at a specially constructed museum. The UK, meanwhile, insists they're part of a permanent collection at the British Museum and should remain here in the UK. We're still no closer to the situation being resolved. It has been going on for decades now. This diplomatic spat will hardly help matters. Dominic Velitis, CBC News, London.
A man's walk to fame. How one TikTok influencer grew his audience by just walking across the province. More on his journey after this.
A group of social work students brought that demand to St. John's City Hall today, toilet included. What sparked the protest? No washrooms after 8 p.m. for those living in tents in nearby Bannerman Park.
The bathroom access is a city issue, and they're the ones that can make the movement, so we're hoping that they do.
It's not illegal to be homeless, but it is illegal to pee while you're homeless. So, yeah, we're here to stand up and basically try to put some pressure on the city to stand up and do the right thing.
Everyone knows housing is a human right, but few people actually know that the access to toilets on demand is a sanitation issue that's written into the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. So we wanted to mobilize to at least get that going, and that's why we're at City Hall, because as the student said, the mayor has the key.
But Mayor Breen didn't show up, so the protesters took the matter inside with little success.
We look forward to an opportunity to speak with Mayor Breen when he's back in-house. We'll come back.
In an emailed statement to CBC News, a city spokesperson said, "This past summer, prior to the encampment, the city made the difficult decision to close restroom facilities in our parks at 8 p.m. due to increased instances of vandalism and health and safety concerns. This vandalism continues to be an issue. As such, we are not able to keep bathrooms open overnight."
The city basically keeps saying that community agencies around town are available for bathroom access 8 p.m. after 8 p.m., but we know that that's not true. For instance, the Gathering Place closes the doors at 8 p.m.
Beyond that 12-hour window, 10 protesters in Bannerman Park are left with few options.
I hold it in till morning. Because, I mean, there's pedophiles around here. There's people that's stalking people. I've been stalked. People tried to do stuff to me. People tried to jump me. I've been assaulted every day for the past month until I took a stand.
And they say access to a bathroom is about more than just a physical need.
That's my safe haven. When I have to get away from everyone here and I have to think, and then 8 o'clock comes, and that's kind of time to wind down, and who doesn't like to go in the bathroom with some newspaper?
Protesters want these hours to be extended, so washrooms here in Bannerman Park are open on a 24/7 basis. But even that, they say, is only a band-aid solution because permanent housing is what's really needed. Henrike Wilhelm, CBC News, St. John's.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohith Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
A BC teacher has managed to grow a substantial TikTok following by walking. It's something he's been doing since 2020. This weekend, he went for his longest jaunt yet, 100 kilometers from Mission to downtown Vancouver. He spoke with the CBC's Amy Bell this morning.
Tell me, how did this all get started?
Yeah, great question. So I began doing these walks during COVID and stuff. One of my teacher colleagues at the school was encouraging us just to get out and do exercise every day. So I started doing like laps around the track at first, and then got kind of bored of that. So wanted to start pursuing bigger walks.
And you went on your longest walk yet just this past weekend. You walked 100 kilometers from Mission to downtown Vancouver. How has your life changed since you started doing these epic walks?
Yeah, that's great. So I think that the biggest change has just been like the weight loss. So I've lost about 155 pounds over the course of the 3 years doing these walks. And then, just grown a really large following on TikTok, been able to help inspire other people to get into walking and exploring their areas.
To get back to your weekend walk, how long did it take to walk from Mission to Vancouver?
It took just a little over 17 hours. So I left around 6 o'clock on Friday night. And then I arrived in Vancouver about 7 in the morning, and then I had like about 30 kilometers still to do roughly.
Right.
Yeah, so it took me about 4.5 hours from there to finish that up.
And do you stop and take little breaks or, little naps?
Yeah, to be honest, like I usually don't. Like once I start, I continuously go until I'll usually stop to grab like drinks or pick up a meal somewhere, but I'll usually just keep walking.
And when you were walking along the highway or alone at night, have you ever felt unsafe during these walks?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that level of uncertainty, right? Where you feel a bit nervous and stuff with drivers out there or nervous about the type of people you're going to encounter. But I was actually surprised this past weekend. I didn't run into really anyone until I got down to like the downtown east side corridor and stuff. When I was coming down Hastings was the first time I really encountered anyone.
Puts my afternoon jaunt around the neighborhood to shame, Darius. Lord.
That is a long walk.
It is.
It's very impressive.
And a lot of weight. 155 pounds over 3 years?
Yeah, incredible.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
And of course, fueled by Fritters and Hawkins cheesies. But
Yes,
what do you need?
that was nice to see.
There you go.
I feel seen. Very good.
Very good, yeah.
Yes.
Join the club.
Still a couple more days of pleasant walking weather. No more rain, at least for the next 24 hours or so, because then we start to see that system move in, as we talked about earlier, heading down from the North Island tomorrow night down to us here in Vancouver later on. Right now, still just a few flurries in central BC, but not much happening. We have that cloud still throughout much of BC, but coming in and out, still some breaks for sunshine. We had some blue skies this morning, and that was nice. We should see that again tomorrow. If we take a look here, you can see that we see that next system roll in tomorrow night. We see it hit the North Island, going to continue down to the rest of the South Coast, or not the rest of the South Coast, but much of the South Coast by parts of the island, by tomorrow morning. There we go. Then the rest of the South Coast later in the afternoon. That was what tripped me up. And then we see that we have plenty of snow for some of the mountain ranges as well. Freezing levels going to be around 1,000 meters for the coastal ranges in the south. So expect to see plenty of snow as that system does roll through. And then just lots of rain for the rest of the island. We saw earlier the accumulation not looking like too much, around 17 millimeters or so for us here in Vancouver over the next 48 hours. That's just one model, though. We're really looking at anywhere from 10 to maybe 25 millimeters over those 2 days. And then another system will roll through Saturday, meaning we could see some more precipitation as well. In terms of winds, we see it still calm tomorrow. So that's why we still have that fog advisory in place for tomorrow. So expect one more foggy one. And then that wind starts to come with the next system that rolls through. So expect we could have some windier mornings, but it's still not looking too bad for the most part. We'll keep an eye. It doesn't look like there'll be a wind warning so far based on what we're seeing, but that could come into play later on. So if we take a look now at our temperatures, you can see that we are sticking around where we have been, still a little bit cooler than we would normally be this time of year, but not too out of the ordinary, just sticking around the same as where we are right now, sort of coming up and down a few degrees over the next few days as we see that ridge move out and that low pressure system move in. Now, in terms of tomorrow, again, last dry day for a while yet for the coast, because we do have this considerable amount of cloud still for many places, but still should see some sunshine, so enjoy it while it is here, because it will be the last time for a while. And again, when we do see rain, because this is going to look like quite the forecast. Oh, wait, actually, first we have snow accumulation. Here we go. This fancy map that we see that snow coming to the North Mountains, or the local mountains, sorry. There we go. And then our consistent forecast for here in Vancouver. But again, just periodic showers should be coming in and out, and just some late showers, really.
So you're saying it's going to be periodic?
Periodic, that's
Very
right.
good. Thanks, Darius. Coming up, a giant exotic tortoise who made global headlines after he was found abandoned in Richmond has found his forever home. Frank the Tank is up next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On December 1st, join us for CBC British Columbia's annual Food Bank Day for a special day of broadcasts. The event is a yearly tradition for many, and we're bringing you a new edition of CBC's Food Bank Day that you can watch and stream live on CBC Gem and cbc.ca/BC. Make the season kind and donate at cbc.ca/foodbankday.
Frank the Tank has found his forever home. The giant exotic tortoise was discovered wandering in a farmer's field last month in Richmond.
At first, it was touch and go whether Frank would even survive. But as Karen Larson reports, this story has a happy ending and shows that slow and steady really does win the race.
A little nervous.
It's a big day for BC's best-known exotic tortoise.
Frank, what a good guy, raring to go.
Frank the Tank is on the move, leaving the care of Maple Ridge SPCA, heading to his forever home at an undisclosed location somewhere in the province.
I'm feeling excited. It's been a long time coming. He's been in care for a little bit over a month and a half now, and we're just very excited that we're able to successfully get him into a fantastic home.
Frank might be excited too, but being a tortoise, it's hard to tell. Sulcata tortoises like Frank hail from the Sahara Desert, so it's no wonder that when he was found abandoned in a Richmond spinach field, he was in rough shape, having trouble breathing, suffering from shell rot. Mark Vosper with the BCSPCA fostered Frank back to health.
The first week, it was a little bit nerve-wracking. He came in, he had upper respiratory, he was really not well. He kind of led under the heat lamps, and he was just secreting liquid for those first few days. He'd been outside in the cold and the wet. He didn't want to eat anything the first few days.
Yeah, 16.9.
Frank is about 15 years old now, but could live to be 150 and could grow to be 5 times his current size, up to 90 kilos. Hence the tank part of his name. But being big and slow and not at all fluffy doesn't make him any less lovable.
He's a real character. He loves his food, he loves his tickles, and he follows you around as well. So it's like having a big stone dog.
Like all pets, Frank has some not so cute moments.
He likes to eat his own poop occasionally if you're not quick enough.
Frank's new family was chosen from hundreds of wannabe adoptees who applied when the story went international.
It's just been overwhelming with the amount of support and just people coming forward who want to know more about not only Frank the Tank, but Sulcata tortoises, and just see where he ends up in his journey.
At his new home, he'll have lots of room to roam and lots of places to dig, the favorite pastime of Sulcata tortoises like Frank the Tank. Karen Larson, CBC News, Maple Ridge.
Frank made good. Awesome.
I love Frank so much.
Who doesn't?
I'm so glad he got a happy ending.
There you go. And remember, 200 pounds, 150 years. Bit of a commitment. Have fun. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, and on YouTube, and our website, cbc.ca/BC. And we'll be here at 11 o'clock for your next local news right after the National. Good night.